Here's a setup for increasing internal rotation of the shoulder capsule. So this is creating more space for the top of the arm bone to rotate in the socket. More space equals more degrees of freedom, equals more breathability in a lot of movements that involve the shoulder, including push-ups, presses, pulls, and others. To do this, we're going to take this position to the ground. This is the first setup, and it's one of my favorites. When we're looking to increase that shoulder capsular space, one of the things that we're trying to dissociate is separating that arm bone from the shoulder blade, increasing the range of motion that that arm bone has to rotate internally without the shoulder blade coming along for the ride. When I'm laying on my side here, I'm effectively pinning my shoulder blade to the ground, which makes this a particularly successful setup for getting some work into the shoulder. So here I am, I'm lying in an L shape. I can have my knees bent or I can stretch them out straight. And my upper arm, my bicep to elbow, is in line with my shoulder or a little bit below. I just won't have you set that elbow above the shoulder for now. That'll be a bit aggressive. So in line with the shoulder or below. My elbow here is bent at 90 degrees, and it's going to be my job to keep that at 90 degrees throughout this work. So here I am, elbow in line with shoulder, lying on the ground. The shoulder blade is pinned, and I'm going to use this top hand to torque my fist to rotate my forearm towards the floor. Okay, and what I'm looking for is a stretch, a wound up stretch inside that shoulder capsule. Now it's not going to necessarily feel like a nice muscle stretch. It could feel deep and tender. You may even feel it traveling down the back of the arm bone. Just be sure that we're not running into anything painful or pinchy. We don't want pain or pinching. Okay? So step one is to find a deep stretch and play around here. Your deepest line of stretch may be different than others, right? So feel free to move that elbow down or up. Feel free to rotate the chest away from the shoulder, which usually decreases the stretch, or rotate the chest towards that shoulder, which usually increases the stretch. Also, keeping a bit of space between that shoulder and that ear, not letting it crunch right up next to the ear too much, is another setup thing to look for. So here we are. I've found a deep stretch inside that shoulder socket. And I'm going to hold and I'm going to breathe in this position for about 1.5 to 2 minutes. That's the first step. I'm going to let my brain and my nervous system get used to this stretch. Okay, so let's say it's been 1.5 to 2 minutes. My next step from there is going to be to apply a little bit of force. I'm going to teach my nervous system and this tissue inside that shoulder socket. I'm going to teach it a little something, and I'm going to teach it how to apply and produce force. So for this, we're going to take a big breath in, trap some of that air, and we're going to begin to fight this bottom hand up into the top hand. Nothing is going to move anywhere, but it's like I'm trying to rotate out of the stretch. So top hand fights into, bottom hand fights into top hand. And I'm going to build slowly. We want to turn the volume up on this work slowly from 0 to your maximum, safest, greatest effort, which may not be much for this shoulder. So we're going to build slowly over the course of about 10 seconds. We're going to take from 0 to 100% of our maximum effort, and you shouldn't see anything moving. If you're doing this right, nothing's going to move. The amount of tension and work will increase in that shoulder and in the rest of the body as we turn that volume up, but nothing will move. So let's say we're at 100%. I'll have you hold there for 10 to 15 seconds, and then we'll relax back down. We'll slowly bleed the work out, the tension out, the same way we ramped in. And now we're going to switch. Now we're going to switch to the other side of that shoulder stuff, and you're going to try to reach your fist, rotating through that shoulder, thinking rotate. Reach that fist for the floor and actively increase that range of motion, that stretch, by trying to get that fist down. making sure that this elbow stays at 90 degrees, that fist isn't floating open. Hold for 10 to 15 seconds, and then relax on down. Watch, rinse, repeat for a second or possibly third set, a rep within this set. A couple pointers: if this is your first time in this setup, perhaps spend that first week just generating stretch, right? This is something you can do daily, but let's see if we can't tolerate 2 minutes of work or stretch there first before we start doing the work, before we start adding that isometric fight in either direction. After a week of getting some good stretch into that socket, then we can start to play around with ramping up some work, just that push-in portion only, right? Maybe do that for the next 3 to 5 days. If that's tolerating well, let's start to add some push and some pull, increasing that range, okay? The first step, can we tolerate that stretch for 2 minutes? If yes, can we tolerate loading, pushing up into that top hand for a few days? If yes, can we then start to add some push and then pull, increasing that range? Wash, rinse, repeat over time, and that shoulder socket will begin to open up and create more range. Alternative positions for this work can be from sitting. Okay, let's say I'm sitting in a chair. We'll get one foot up on the chair, elbow on top of the knee. Here my shoulder blade is free, so I need to be a little bit more aware. Same concept, I'm going to rotate that fist down, seeking out a stretch inside that capsule. But I need to be aware of that shoulder blade. I'm going to rotate that fist down only as far as I can without that shoulder hiking. So I have a 1,000-pound weight on top of that shoulder. I'm going to keep that shoulder down as I stretch with my other hand. Additionally, standing next to a wall, if you'll come with me, is another option, okay? So here I have the fireplace. Now let's pretend it's a wall. What I'll be doing is sidling up next to that wall. I'm going to get my shoulder, my elbow on that wall. Again, I can play around with how I rotate my torso. The upper arm bone will be against the wall, and I'll be stretching that fist down, using that wall as feedback. Same idea, only as far as I can go without that shoulder coming along for the ride. If that starts to lift, that's too high, right? Or too far. Let's go ahead and stretch on down, seek out that winding stretch inside that capsule without that shoulder blade coming along for the ride. Those are two alternate setups that allow you to produce this stretch, get the work into the shoulder capsule without having to create a setup on the ground. Though I do prefer the one on the ground the best, because you're able to control for the elements like the shoulder blades and do good work into that shoulder without having to think about it too much. Okay, give that a shot. This is something that can be done daily. You don't have to go to 100% every session, right? But I would sprinkle that in 3 to 5 times a week. You can do some good work into that shoulder and see how that feels.